Thank you. This meeting is being recorded, and if anyone else present is recording it, you must notify the chair at this time. Looking to see if anyone is so doing. Seeing no one, thank you. I wanted to, first as an introduction, mention that for open meeting law, attendance at open meetings, public meetings is guaranteed. We're pretty flexible on this committee about using the chair's discretion for public participation. Obviously, attendance and participation are contingent upon a reasonable level of respect for others and for the process. And I think that's. Did you save it? Saying, oh, not the open. Welcome, Amy. Just starting, just called to order. And I wanted to officially welcome Jeff and Peter onto the board. And we're just noting that you're now an alternate yet. And because you had been involved in the last meeting around the thing we're continuing, I was inclined to elevate you to a voting member since we have, or it's not necessary, but you okay with that?
Yes, I
Yeah.
was supposed to get sworn in this afternoon as an alternate and forgot. So I think I might technically still be full member.
That's interesting.
I think technically, yes, until you're sworn in as the alternate or the full member.
Okay.
So now we have 5 full members.
I won't elevate you then.
Okay.
And I also want to announce and acknowledge that Charles Chuck McKinney has resigned from the board. He mentioned to us kind of discreetly at the last meeting to Eric and myself, and he opted not to have a public mention of it while he was present at the last meeting. But I did want to acknowledge that and appreciate his service. And he was also serving as the vice chair. I want to acknowledge that. So the first order of business is, oh, it should have people introduce themselves, just remind myself, resume, because they can't see our name cards. So I'm George Tolinsas, I'm the chair. You want to go around?
Oh, sure. Amy McMahon, soon to be alternate.
Peter McIver. Jeff Sauser.
And then I'm Sarah Brown-Anson.
Thank you. So the first order of business is the approval of the minutes from the March 7th meeting. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move them.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion.
There was a small typo on page 3. Very small typo. Judith Maloney expressed her concerns. Just the word concerns is spelled wrong.
Where in the paragraph?
It's about 2/3 of the way down page 3. It's just a single sentence of her comment.
We have a fine legal mind on our board.
Just reading through that.
Great.
Still haven't found it. If you could
Oh,
get me
do
to
you
it.
want me to circle it on your?
Yes,
page?
that would be
I
great.
can do that.
Thank you very much.
No
I'll
problem.
make that change.
While I was doing that, any other comments on the minute?
You.
Hearing none with that correction, all in favor, approve the minutes? That's unanimous. Thank you. And the next item is a continuation of the application of Starbucks Coffee Company for property located on 200 Mohawk Trail for site plan review. And we have Danielle, I think. Thank
Yes,
you.
hi. Yes, Lisa and I are both here from Kimley Horn tonight. Caroline is on vacation right now.
Great. Thank you very much. And Eric, you got what you need as far as the names, or
Yes.
need to know roles, or you?
I'm good.
Okay, very good. And I wanted to just mention for you, for the applicants, and for the information of the public, that though neither Jeff nor Peter were on the board at the time of the last hearing, there is an option within Massachusetts law of someone who has missed one meeting of a proceeding to participate and vote if they do a procedure, if they read the minutes or watch a recording of that, it's called the Mullen Rule, named after somebody Mullen. It was a case. And then there's a form that has to be signed, and both Peter and Jeff have completed that process. So they're able to participate and vote in this process. And before asking if you had anything you want to add, I wanted to acknowledge that we had received a revised landscaping plan since the last meeting. So thank you for that. And I think everyone on the board has had a chance to see it. So I'll turn to you folks. If you had obviously a continuation, if you had anything new you wanted to share or highlight or anything.
Yeah, hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Danielle Leonore with Kimley Horn. Thank you guys for looking at this again tonight for the Starbucks drive-through reconfiguration to have 14 queuing spaces. As Greg mentioned, since the last meeting, we have submitted the revised landscape planting where we substituted a lot of the materials with more native species. That is the only modification since the last time that we spoke. I believe it was just more time to look through the trip generation memo and answer any questions that you guys might have. Lisa Wan is our traffic engineer. She's here with me tonight to answer any questions that you guys might have.
Excellent. Thank you. So I wanted to open this to board members for any questions you have of the applicant, and especially Peter and Jeff. This is your first opportunity, so if you had anything you wanted to start with.
And what is the parking space requirement for the site? If you happen to know. The question?
I can answer that.
Yeah.
So, actually, I can't answer that. I didn't have that one memorized.
Is the number of spaces that are shown the minimum allowable, or is it just kind of a coincidence they left the spaces that were there?
They meet the parking requirements.
Do they exceed them, I guess is the question.
They could actually exceed them, but we'll let Jeff,
Yes.
person answer that question.
Yeah, so we are in compliance with the parking code for this site. We are only removing what is needed. Our limits of disturbance and work for this project is mainly limited to the relocation of the reconfiguration of the drive-through. And so it's not on our site plan sheet. I don't have it off the top of my head. I don't memorize the parking code, but we're in compliance with it here and not modifying anything internal to that center.
I guess my question would be if you could lose more spaces and add more, like chop up the central portion of the parking lot that's where that light pole is. Like, are there opportunities to cut into that and add more trees or anything like that? I can't imagine.
We did take a look at that with Starbucks, and the desire is to leave that parking remaining just for the customers and the number of people coming to the site, and to have that available as needed.
What sort of leverage do we have to? And as long, I imagine we can't go below the minimum required parking, or we're probably stepping on DPA's toes or somebody else's. But like, one of our purviews is to oversee the landscape design of the site for the purposes of environmental benefits, pedestrian flows, that sort of thing. We could make an ask to lose extra parking spaces and make them green, make them trees.
And that was your question in relation to if it's met, if it's exceeded.
Yeah.
Your concern is,
It doesn't seem-
what was your interest?
It's not I don't think it's in Greenfield's interest to exceed the parking requirement, and we would trade those spaces for green space.
Eric, you wanted to comment on that?
I would agree with Jeff completely. The only difference is this is a redevelopment project and not a brand new project on an undeveloped site. If it was an undeveloped site, yes, we would not want excessive parking. Probably require the green space, but in this case, the parking already exists and they're reusing an already developed site. So that would be a burden on the applicant to have to rip up asphalt.
Okay.
I had a question about the revised landscaping plan. You said that the plantings will be native. I'm wondering, like, what's the scope of that? Native to what geographic area?
Yeah, so native too. So we had previously had other trees and shrubs and grasses proposed, and it was we were addressing Nancy, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Hazard's comments to provide more native species, so specifically native to this area. And so we replaced, I can get specific with which ones were replaced, but she'd set a specific list and request for local species to this site, and those were the ones that we were able to make that substitution here.
Okay, so did the plantings come from a specific list? Did you use a specific list, and what list would that be?
Yeah, so in the message of comments from Nancy Hazard, she's with a member of the Greenfield. She proposed for trees, she proposed 4 different options for shrubs. She proposed another alternative, and for grasses, she had also proposed another couple ideas. And so we went, we took in all of her suggestions, and for all of those, we're able to make those substitutions. So it's not like a municipality list, but from the Greenfield, I'm not looking at the Greenfield,
Greening
the
Greenfield.
Greening Greenfield list suggestions. We use those for our modifications.
Okay, thank you.
And then Ms. Wan, I'm really interested in hearing, last time we met, they didn't really have the traffic expert on the meeting. So could you just walk us through how many expected, car trips there will be? If there's been any comparable Starbucks that you could put up to show us like what you're expecting?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so my name is Lisa Wan, traffic engineer at Kimley Horn Associates. So we are basing the trips based on the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and this is based on the trip generation manual that has text tables, data plots, and the statistics that really describes the current state of the practice. It provides traffic engineers with a single document and guide on trip generation rates. So this data, it represents a weighted average of those collected throughout the United States since 1996. So in 2021, ITE did release a new update, which is the 11th edition. We're using land use code 937, and 937 is going to be coffee shop drive-through. And within this site specifically, the sites were surveyed in 1990s, 2000s, and 2010s in a variety of different states. I'll just name a couple: California, Colorado, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York, Pennsylvania, Vermont, and so forth. I do want to give you some background regarding how many number of studies did IT really conducted. So during the typical AM peak hour, there were 78 studies that were conducted, just meaning that there were 78 like different locations that they actually conducted. During the PM, it was 36 studies. So there is really good data when we're looking at the number of studies. And like we mentioned, this is coming from like a weighted average throughout the different years and the different locations that they have conducted. So when we're looking at the trip generation, and I can share my screen if you all would like. Do you all see my screen right now?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. So yeah, so when we're talking about the number of trips that this site is generating itself, so let me just highlight a couple of things. So this is the proposed conditions. So during the typical, AM peak hour, it's going to be generating 370 trips. And then during the PM, it's 168 trips. So that just means like in total, in and out. But when we're thinking about Starbucks and when we're thinking about other areas, you're going to have attraction of like pass by trips. Trips that are already on the road, they're going to go to Starbucks. So meaning that, yes, Starbucks itself is going to generate 370 trips, but it's not going to generate 370 new trips because trips are already on the roadway. So there's a pass by. So when we're taking a look at how many net new trips will Starbucks really be generating? People are not on the road already. It's 184 in the AM peak hour. and that's in and out. So 94 in, 90 out. In the PM peak hour, it's 76, which is the total. And then during a Saturday midday, it's about 208. And then when we're thinking about, so right now there is a Friendly's. And when we're thinking about how many additional trips would be on the roadway that the folks would actually be experiencing, because Friendly's already generates X amount of trips. So the net new trips, based on ITE, we're saying that it's going to be an additional 143 new trips that you'll feel on the roadway in the AM peak hour, 53 during the PM peak hour, and 176 during the Saturday midday.
Help, Amy? Do you have a follow-up?
No, I
Yeah.
just,
Oh.
there was a lot of the residents were expressing, concern, so I think it's good to have the traffic expert just, for the record, put it all out there that this is, a process, and Starbucks has put thought and resources into this information.
Yeah, I think it's good to have this presentation. Last meeting, it was a little confusing.
Yeah, we
because-
didn't have the traffic
Yeah,
expert.
yeah, so.
Yeah, Ms. Wan, I'll call it myself. I wanted to ask a bit too about the traffic statement. And we did have a traffic person last time, but they were, it was a difficult communication link. So
Oh, okay, we could, yeah, but he didn't say very much.
it was hard to hear. Yeah. As I mentioned last time, it just, I know you're talking about the range or the number of studies, and some of these pages in the traffic statement refer to, 78 or higher, or, but there's also the vehicle pass by rate. There are specific studies cited 30 or so years ago. And some of them are like for a high turnover sit-down restaurant. Some are fast food with drive-through. And just on the surface, it seemed like, boy, 30 years ago, that's a long time. And is that being used somehow to represent the current situation? And I wondered how dominant was the drive-through component of the business at that time compared to currently. So I wondered if you could speak to that a bit.
Yeah, of course, of course. So one thing, and I'm so sorry that I failed to mention this, but ITE, the trip generation, it's really across industry standard that all traffic engineers really use a single document. So yes, the data dates back to, 1996, but it's a weighted average. And there's different locations, different years that there's different studies that were being conducted. And I think what's helpful is that when we're looking at the AM peak hour, there were 78 studies done since 1996, but there were pinpoints, there were sites that were surveyed, in 2000s, 2010s, and so forth. And then during the PM peak hour, there were 36 studies. So it is a weighted average. And yes, it was since 1996, but there were sites that were surveyed back, in 2000s and 2010s and so forth. And it's across multiple states.
Thank you. Can you speak to the drive-through aspect, the seeming increase of the drive-through phenomenon as a component of traffic studies?
So yes. Oh, so
No, just
sorry.
quick mention to Lisa, just to confirm, the specific use you're looking at in the ITE, I think is the specific to the drive-through restaurant, right?
Exactly. I was going to say that if we're taking a look at the land use code, so there's different land use code that could be done. So we looked at 937, which is a coffee donut shop with drive-through. But then there's a different land use code that is without drive-through. So there's two different specifications regarding drive-through or not. So we're looking at the one with drive-through, 937.
Thank you. Thank you. Other questions from board members?
The total daily traffic is 2,000 something?
Yeah, 2,300, yeah.
What's your intuition? And so I know that IT, they do their best, but what's your intuition on the actual traffic? Is that an overestimate? And not setting you up, but I can't find it for some reason, but there's, MassDOT has an interactive map that can show you traffic counts at different locations and on state roads, and they have a few on Route 2 in that area. And I think the biggest number on those is from 2022, and it's like 12,000 cars in one direction.
Mhm.
But so the thing I'd be worried about, like, so we talked about doing and maybe not asking you to do it, but as part of this broader planning consideration of this part of town, a big planning study that takes into account all the uses and all the intersections. And we already have, I don't know how many square feet, millions, hundreds of thousands of square feet of supposedly high volume uses like grocery store, big box retail. And yet the traffic is only about 12,000 cars per day. So I'd be pretty surprised if Starbucks added a sixth more to that, 16 to 15 to 20% more to that. I would suggest that that's an overcount, and we wouldn't expect to see that many cars, or all the other uses on that same road would be dumping way more traffic too. And do you guys, I know you do more elaborate counts and studies. When you do those, does the actual number comport with the ITE typically?
It's going to vary because when we're looking at the daily trips, it's just saying that it's going to be generating 2,300 trips, but we have to think about trips that are already on the roadway. So if we're taking a look, for instance, like the AM peak hour, we're saying about 50% of the trips, they are already on the roadway. So for your instance, like that 22,000 trips along the corridor, they are already on the roadway. Some people are actually going to go to Starbucks. So we are going to generate new trips, but Starbucks itself, we look at the pass by, a lot of the trips are already on the roadway. They're just going to make a pit stop, go here, and then go back to their end destination.
I got it. So 2,300 trips, that's not added to the Route 2 traffic. The only place that might be added is to the small drive, the Robbins Road that connects Route 2 to Starbucks.
Yes, and don't forget, so there are going to be like pass by. For instance, we could say IT doesn't have a pass by for the daily, but for instance, if we said 25% of the daily trips, those would be pass by, it's only going to generate, X amount of trips, like new trips to that site throughout the day.
I think that's helpful context, just so people understand what is or isn't 2,000 new cars. People visualize, a line 100 cars long going straight into Starbucks, but that's not really what these numbers are telling us.
It's just to that site. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I'll call myself again. And I appreciate having the longer, period to consider the traffic factors. One concern I have, or one scenario, currently for Friendly's, it's the southernmost connection from Robbins Road that is the directed drive-through entrance. They have a sign drive-through at the southernmost, further away from Route 2. And you're proposing, if I have it right, that people would enter only at the one closer to Route 2, and it's proposed exit only at the more southerly one. And I'm guessing that's because you anticipate sometimes you'd have a even longer queue for the drive-through, which you show on your materials. My concern is that if you look at the traffic study from Aldi's, when they're up and running, there'll be significantly more cars coming down Robbins Road from Aldi's, and they had anticipated that the level of service there would go from a C with about 24-second delay to a D with about 51-second delay. And my concern is you'll have, and I drove this a few times today trying to visualize it, So if you're coming into Robbins Road off Route 2 and you want to turn into that closest entrance to the site we're talking about, possibly three, but definitely four cars would block that, would block you from getting in. And my concern would be you'd have people, if you have a queue that long there of four cars, for that time, a car wanting to turn into your site would stop and would block traffic, and that could cause a backup. If people are taking a right off of Route 2, that could cause a backup onto Route 2. And, we're trying to look out for the convenience and safety issues. And even worse, if people are taking a left who are going westbound and they start to go and then they realize things have gotten jammed up and they're in the middle of the roadway. So when I looked at it as it currently is, I said, boy, that makes sense. What Friendly's did to have them, have the option of going further off the roadway where you're going to be less likely blocked to get access to the drive-through. So I just wanted to paint that scenario for you and the board and hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think we hear what you're saying, and I'm looking at it now, I'm visualizing what you're saying. I think the concern is if we made that southern access an entrance as well, you would have people coming in and queuing into that road, into Robbins Road, as opposed to queuing as opposed to having the option to queue down the site, and so that really keeps that from clogging up Robbins. And so it's actually proposed to clog, or how we have that is proposed to clog Robbins less and make sure that we're maintaining the flow on Robbins to the maximum extent possible.
In terms of the current geometries of those driveways, could they both be two-way? If we wanted it to, this is just a question of signage? Or would the curbs need?
We can have that conversation with Starbucks, and that's definitely something that we're able to do. The reason we did it was to keep Robbins clearer from queuing, people turning and queuing back that way. It keeps them more on the site.
The ask could be that it's right now, in theory, just based on the geometries, they could both be two-way. And I guess they are maybe even now.
Yeah,
So
they are now, and they could be.
If for some reason, so if we wanted to keep the queuing inside the site, to just keep it out of the public realm and keep it from competing with cars getting to the other stores on this street, we could start with the plan of making the southern entrance exit only. But if it becomes a problem, George, like you're saying, we could reserve the right to change that signage so that we change the functionality of that southern entrance and it becomes a two-way. Is that allowed?
Yes.
Yeah. Like, would they need to do new studies and things to remove that sign, or is that just a quick change?
Just a removal of a sign, yeah.
Yeah, no further studies would be required.
I think a lot of people are concerned about is Robbins Road hasn't had there's a lot going on there. That's going to go on there. So to have some flexibility just from a functional standpoint on behalf of the town, we might be a little more comfortable testing something if we can undo it and change it, and you guys don't have a problem with it.
As I was saying, my real concern is, we've all experienced here in town on Federal Street, there are two Dunkin' Donuts sites. And we've all experienced cars backing onto that road, waiting to get off, onto the site. The pull of coffee is strong.
They weren't nice enough to build 14 car queue lanes.
Yeah, and that 14 car, but you're also anticipating queuing people on a larger number. I think it's 20. If you were to keep, so if people came in to the southernmost, you'd be worried people would be trying to cut in. If people were coming in to park, that would be different. If they were just going to park their cars, you're anticipating there's a lot of drive-through. And so if people come in from the southerly one and more people are queued, they're kind of like fighting to get into the drive-through.
Right, and they're just going to start backing up onto the road, which would be the concern.
Yeah, as I said, my bigger concern is people getting stuck on Route 2. And I can see that. You got four cars waiting, at the end of Robbins Road for the light. and you have people turning left onto Robbins Road. And then they don't, it's a busy place. You're trying to be careful, but you might not anticipate, oh, that car isn't actually getting in. They might not wait. And so you have them stuck out in the roadway.
So just to remind everybody that, typically the solution to a problem like this would be to add a signal, but there is a signal. So is there, like, Eric, you were talking about the, modifications at the Big Y intersection. Has MassDOT talked about modifying the turn lanes, the Q lanes for Robbins Road too? Is that on the table to try to keep, backups from impacting Route 2, like George is talking about?
Yeah, that's a good question. I know they're putting the light in at the Big Y intersection there, and they are doing other improvements, but I can't answer your question without looking at that.
I attended that phase one planning meeting because we live down the road from there. And they had anticipated changing the light structures
Timing of the lights.
in coordination with the added light at Big Y.
Exactly, like.
But not major restructuring of the lanes. And certainly not Robbins or Colerain Road.
Thank you.
So George, what's the movement you think is most likely to get tied up? Now that I'm actually looking at a map.
So currently, people are directed to go to the drive-through at Friendly's and the southern. So you could go on, there would be likely an opening there, even if people are waiting at the light to get onto Route 2 at the end of Robbins Road. They have multiple more cars, would have to be backed up to block that. And this would be getting people very quickly off Route 2 onto the site. I don't anticipate people would be leaving an opening there for people to get in. And so if you have multiple people trying to turn right, if they're going eastbound, or turning left, if they're going westbound, you could have a jam on Route 2.
Yeah, I see.
I think it's that, trying to have people come into that entrance particularly concerns me. But I don't have a perfect solution in that. I mean, I think Friendly's does that now because they're not anticipating that long. I don't know if that's been an issue for them, but they're not anticipating as long a drive-through line as you are with how Starbucks would function. Is that accurate to say?
Right, as we plan for the new Starbucks, we just want to make sure we have planning in place for the larger queue lines and to move people through as quickly and efficiently as possible.
Is the 14 car, I mean, is that a pretty specific, did Starbucks say just give us the longest queue line you can fit, or do they always call for 14 cars? Is there some sort of metric they have in terms of just their operation?
They run it, they do look at it individually for all sites. But their goal in general is if they want to be able to queue more people in a safe way. And so they always look at the options of what is the safest way to queue should they have this many cars. But they do take a look at that as they go through the process.
Yeah, it sounds like it's like pick your poison. Do you want if there were to be, I mean, 14 sounds like a lot. I'd be surprised if there were 14 cars in that queue ever. And it's certainly not 20 plus, but maybe that's possible. I haven't been to a Starbucks at that time to see. I don't know, is there other side?
Dude, it's like,
Is it like that? Okay.
whoa, you can make a lot of money just selling yeah,
Express lane pass.
like iPhone holders for cars and like do some
Okay.
windshield wiping.
Yeah, so if it's likely that it's going to get backed up at times, we'd rather, I think, the backup be on Robbins Road and not on, I mean, I know, I appreciate the concern to not push the backup into the public right of way if you can avoid it. But if the consequence of that is we run a higher risk of having backups pile up on Route 2, I would personally take the backup on Robbins Road. It's not much doesn't do much otherwise anyway. It's just sitting there. So, we should use it.
Mr. Chairman, I do recall from the previous meeting that they stated that the typical queue length for a operation like this is 10 cars
Like the typical number of cars that are actually there.
in the queue
Yeah.
for a store like this.
Okay.
Because if you,
Is that accurate? Because that's what I remember from the last meeting.
I'd have to check into that. Sorry, I wasn't at the last meeting. And I'd have to double check that. But Yes, the amount that we show is if it was peak hour and there's a lot of people and this is what's there, that's the worst. You're not going to see 20 cars always in that queue. And so that is a worst case scenario. But like I said, we want to make sure we have the space to queue it when you do hit that peak time in the morning when everyone's grabbing their coffee and running around and times like that.
And I'll point out, if it were treated, I mean, I don't think for friendlies, it says you can't come in to the opening closest to Route 2, but it directs people. It says drive-through at the more southerly one. And if you look at the layout, you know, you have the queue of the ghost cars, the ones in the lighter shade, going back down the driveway, but you could fit another couple cars and they would be off Robbins Road. They would be in, you know, within that. I can't show it to you, but they would be within, you know what I mean? They would be here. You'd have another couple of roads to be off of Robbins. But so that would be 16 cars to here. So that seems to me that would be much more reasonable in keeping with our guidance to make, you know, maximize the convenience and safety for vehicular movement in relation to adjacent ways, which is one of our approval guidelines. So that would be my inclination, would be to condition that does remain an entrance, and I would suggest it be not, you know, restricted from coming in the other place, but similar to Friendly's, it seems like having the drive-through designated there, encouraged there, would help with that Route 2 risk, and you'd still have, you know, 16 cars that could be on site. So that's a scenario that would make me feel a lot more comfortable about our responsibility for, you know, that kind of, you know, problematic scenario on Route 2.
And just to be clear, the northern entrance was also, it's always been an exit too, right? The southern one wasn't the only, because I mean, you also have to think about the cars coming out of the drive-through, where are they going to stack up when they get to Route 2? And in that case, we'd rather that happen on the Starbucks parking lot than on Robbins Road. So they would go across the top of the lot and then kind of make a right to that short little segment of Robbins Road. And if there are too many cars, that's Starbucks' problem, and it doesn't become a burden for McDonald's and Aldi's and other people. You know, an undue burden. They all get in each other's way sometimes, but.
Right, with the flow, that makes more sense as an exit.
Yeah.
And, you know.
But on a, you know, random time when it's not peak hour, both could function either way, and it'd probably be fine. There's just a couple of cars here and there.
And just a reminder, when we're thinking about trips, not every single trip they're going to be using the drive-through. Like some will also just be parking as well, like going into a store. Yeah.
Especially if the line is long, like if I see a long drive-through, I just am like, let me run in there.
Mm-hmm.
To that point, it seemed like there was a lot of seating inside. And that's probably just because it's a big building and you got to fill it up with something. Do they give you any guidance on the number of people that on that split between drive-through traffic and how many people are going to come inside and either just grab their coffee and leave or hang out and use the cafe space?
Yeah, so we did a site in another location in Massachusetts and we got their transaction data, and it was really interesting to see because it was about a 50-50 split between people actually using drive-through and people are actually going into the store. So it was about like a 50-50 split.
And is the going into the store grabbing the thing that they ordered on their phone or
It could be like the mobile pickup. It could be
Yeah.
a mobile pickup. Yes, when we looked at the transaction data, it varied. But yes, it was about like 50% are actually going to store either mobile pickup or actually ordering. And then 50% are actually going through the drive-through.
yeah, interesting. Okay.
I wanted to also acknowledge that we're always trying to encourage reuse. You're reusing this building. You're just changing the signs to some degree. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, you know, it's a more environmentally sensitive thing to reuse what's already there. So note that.
Do we know how long the lease is? Is that something we can know?
You can ask the question.
How long is the Starbucks, they might not have signed yet, is,
I don't know
Yeah.
the answer to that. I don't know. I'm sorry.
okay.
Are there more questions from the board?
Yeah, I have a couple more questions. This is kind of related to the landscaping plan. I'm just wondering if there's any need to go before the Conservation Commission for the work being done on the site?
That's not triggered here, that need. We're actually reducing our impervious here, and so we're adding in more landscape island area, more plantings. And there's no environmental features that we're impacting because it's already a paved parking lot area. And so for that reason, we don't need to go to the Conservation Commission.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And then I don't know if we've talked about lighting on the site. I don't remember that from last time, but could you talk about that?
Yeah, so with our plan, we're just proposing the modification of the drive-through. We don't have, in our civil plan set, we don't have revised, lighting shown.
Okay. And are you making any changes to stormwater management?
No, we're not modifying that. And like I said, we're increasing the pervious area here. So we'll have some more green areas, some more trees. So in general, it'll be an improvement to the site by increasing and enhancing that landscape area.
And then I wanted to ask about dumpsters as well.
Okay. So yes, we have a dumpster proposed on the site plan. It's just to the south of the building, between the building and the drive-through area, and it's going to be within a dumpster enclosure.
Okay.
On the lighting question, is it just, you haven't gotten to that, or is that not something you're gonna change?
So a lot of the times they use the existing facilities that are out there. We are not responsible for modifying the lighting on Kimley Horn's side.
Okay. Eric, is that something that's gonna get, is that typical? They just kind of keep the, I guess if it's just a tenant, like, are the lights good there? Are they low,
It's a good question.
dark sky or whatever?
That's a good question. I don't know exactly if the lighting out there has been upgraded to LED and downs that we require. So, I mean, the board could condition that if any lighting is changed, it must be downcat and shielded.
Yeah, that sounds good.
You folks don't happen to know that, I'm taking it. Okay, thank you.
No, and I have done other of these in other locations, and a lot of the times they reuse a lot of the lighting that's already out there just because it's available, and we're reusing the majority of the parking area. Can't 100% confirm with this site because we're not contracted to do that, but I've seen that
That's
done on
good.
other
That's a good
sites.
one.
Yep. Actually, we just looked at your lighting and it looks good.
Oh.
Great.
Well, But we can still make it a condition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To the extent that there's lighting that's not compliant with those considerations.
Yep.
So I guess what you're saying is we can't make them do something now that they weren't otherwise gonna do because it's an existing use and, they're already doing some things. But if they were to change something in the future, what if they were to repave, resurface the lot, but not restructure it?
I
Did
mean,
you get a permit for that? Like,
that's a good question. No, I don't think so. They don't need a permit unless they would do, unless they're doing an access cut into it, then they need a DPW or state access permit. But if they're just repaving an existing parking lot, no.
And to your earlier initial question, Jeff, it has been the intention of the planning board for a few years and flows from the master plan to try to reduce parking to the agreed possible impervious surface.
Right.
Yes.
So that's a general principle.
Yeah.
But to clarify, Eric, I thought you were saying that the board could condition that if those lights weren't downcast, that could be a condition to make them compliant with that?
Yeah, the board could make that condition, yes. Even if they are existing now, you could say any non-compliant light and fixture must meet the zoning ordinance standards.
okay.
But you had a look at it and it looks like it does meet them?
Well, some of them might.
Okay.
Some of them looked like they pointed down, some of them looked like they pointed at the, like, to, you know, at the roof line of the building or something.
Yeah, some more like direction.
Yeah, they're like those white boxes that
Yeah,
point down. Yeah. Mhm.
The other one though, looked like it was, you know, LED downcast lighting like we
Mhm.
require.
so to be clear, it's, we can make them do it now, or we can only make them do it when they replace the lighting or fix the lighting.
If there's any non-compliant lighting fixtures out there, you could have them replace it now.
I see, okay.
Further questions from the board?
I have one question to add, just, I'm been staring at this queue line for a while. And I noticed in the original submission, right at the pickup window, it says traffic lanes to merge. And I see that you've changed the parking lines in the back, but retained parking towards the, I guess that would be the east side of the lot. And there is still a travel lane coming back, but it's pinched at the beginning of the plan at the entrance of your queue line.
All right.
How exactly do you intend to access those parking spaces? And how do you envision access all the way around the property if that queue line is full?
Yeah, so typically spaces like that, they're there in existing condition, and so they're remaining. A lot of those spaces are usually used for like employee parking or things like that. The customer is not gonna go through the drive-through and then go all park and keep going. They're gonna park right in front of the door, and what's gonna get them to the site the easiest. So typically spaces like that, we find that like employees can place their cars, or like if someone orders and needs to pull off to make sure well, at this point it's before the drive-through, but so I don't anticipate that that's going to be a significant usage of their cars. And then they are angled parking, and so the drive-through width that we have, even though it's reduced, is sufficient for the angled parking and one-way drive aisle.
So
Make a motion?
could make a motion, we could deliberate some, but we could start with the motion, sure. You want to?
Okay. I would like to motion that we approve the site plan for Starbucks. Do I need to add more to the motion?
If you want to have conditions.
With the condition that if there's any lighting present on the site that does not conform with Greenfield ordinance, it be replaced.
Let's second that.
Can we add some more conditions to that?
Yeah.
We couldn't ask the
discussion.
motion maker to add a condition, sure.
The other one would just be the flexibility on the directionality of the driveways. So if, I guess, so are we approving the site plan such that the southern entrance is an exit only? Is that
That's
detailed?
their proposal.
Yeah.
So as the motion is, that would be part of it unless there's a condition that says otherwise.
Yeah, my condition about that would be that, that both be two-way. And that there be similar to the Friendlies, a sign encouraging people to enter the drive-through from the southerly connection on Robbins Road to avoid that Route 2 issue.
Would you accept that as a friendly amendment?
Yes.
You second that as well?
What is the, like, what if we decide that it's not working so well and we need to make some changes to that, to the signage? Like, can we have a condition that compels Starbucks to change the way they operate, or at least sign those driveways? Like if we decide in our judgment that we would want to do it some other way, just so we have some flexibility as the other projects come online too, we want to kind of see what these impacts actually are.
I don't know that we have, I mean, now is our decision point.
Yes.
I think we don't go back and say, oh, you know.
That'd just be a future negotiation with the property owner or something. Like we can't make a contingent on our judgment being in the future that,
Not for a site plan.
okay.
Mm.
Okay, then the two-way.
Two-way, and I would say a condition that, like I say, to be similar to what is there now for Friendlies, it says drive-through. It's not preventing people from coming in the other one. It's just encouraging them to come that way. And so, is that acceptable?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just make sure I have the two conditions properly, written down. So motion and seconded to approve the site plan for Starbucks with the two conditions, the lighting. All lighting must conform with Greenfield zoning standards. And two, both access points to the property shall be two-way.
And we want a condition about having a sign for that, or is that too directive to people think, or?
I think people will figure it out, but we could. I don't think there's any harm.
I think I think to your original point, that directing the traffic in, it presumably you could add two, if not three cars in that entryway.
Right, exactly.
That still allows more than the 14 amount, but does, and Jeff, to your point, the exit way will be naturally out that front. So if it does back up, it's going to be backed up in their parking lot, and it doesn't necessarily adversely affect the abutting properties.
And I think just having the sign like Friendly's just says drive-through. It doesn't prohibit someone from coming in another part. It's just,
Okay.
queuing people. Oh, here's a good place.
Yeah.
No pun intended with the queue, but yeah, it's just.
Makes their parking lot safer also. Less maneuvering through half of their parking area. Okay, I'm good with that. So is that a third condition or part of the second
I
condition?
think it's part of the second.
So both access points shall be two-way with a sign, with a drive-through sign on this, southern.
So, any further discussion?
Did we miss any opportunities, Eric or George, that we weren't aware of because we're too new?
No, yeah, you both did very well.
We got all the low hanging fruit on this one.
You're gonna make good board members.
Okay, if there's no further deliberation, all board members in favor of the motion with the conditions? Aye, it is unanimous.
Congratulations on your first motion.
Congratulations. Approved site plan.
Thank you all.
So do you want to give the 20-day, or is that something they understand about, 20-day appeal period?
Yeah, I mean, if, for appeals that are relative to site plans, it goes under chapter 40A, section 17. So if anybody appealed this, they would have to do it within 20 days.
I assume you.
Once it's filed with the city clerk. Once the decision is filed with the city clerk, takes about a week. Then, once it gets clocked in, the 20-day appeal period starts.
Thank you. And I assume you folks are familiar with that, but just, we often mention it.
No, I
just to,
appreciate
base
the
that.
information and just the reminder of the process.
Sure.
That's for them to appeal for conditions,
No,
or the
Both,
community to,
well, actually,
both actually, them and the audience,
Yeah.
members of the public.
okay.
okay, we're done. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
You as well.
Take care.
Stay warm.
Okay, so the next, that was our main item. The next thing is board and staff reports. Amy is our representative to the Community Preservation Committee. I know there's a lot happening.
Last week, we forwarded our recommendations to the city council for funding. The co-op had withdrawn its request for the historical $100,000 for their project. The time windows, we have a 2-year time window. It didn't seem like it was going to line up. So that made our job much easier. And I'm happy to report that we fully funded the hillside splash pad park, which has no shade. And the abutters mentioned that, it was in need of shading and infrastructure improvements. And it's the first time that the rec department has had any project fully funded. So it's really nice to see our tax dollars that work in the community. We certainly put quite a few in service of the rec department, which it always bears mention that the city only funds salaries for the rec department. So it is just extraordinary the amount that is done in the city by the rec department. And it's nice to see the CPC funding go to, honor their work.
Thank you. And I'm the rep on the Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee about the master plan. And as I've been mentioning, there's been been working with the Conway School of Design, well, it's now just called the Conway School. And about doing updates of two of the chapters of the master plan, the land use and the natural, historic, and cultural resources chapters. And they just provide, Eric's been on the four-person working group from the SGIC, working with the Conway students, and they just provided their draft recommendations. And can you, Eric, say again what the time frame is for what's most of that?
The core team, which is four members of the committee, including myself, Nancy Hazard, Mary Chicklefine, and Jonah Keene. Today they forwarded us the final draft of the two chapters. It was great to see how the whole plan came together. It's about 80 pages with the page of recommendations that you saw. It was forwarded to the committee. So we have till 5 p.m. tomorrow to comment on that, the core team. We've already done our review. I've done mine, and most of the core team has already commented on just some minor edits to the chapters. They did a great job. I can't wait to the whole full committee and the board to see it. So production, the deliverables will be end of April. We will actually have that turned over to us. And then as a city, we decide what to do with the updated chapters, which I imagine would be the sustainable committee reviewing it, maybe making some changes, then having with further community input. And then from there, the board would adopt the two chapters as an update to the 2014 Sustainable Master Plan.
Because as we talked about before, and you might be familiar with the master plan is technically a planning board document. So that's in process and moving along. They seem very capable, the students, and work very hard on this.
Yeah, it was amazing to see how the draft, they talk and you tell them everything and then you don't see it. And then you finally see the product and it's like, wow, they did a great job. Putting everything together, it was nice.
And so the board would be getting that, you're suggesting, Eric, after we process a bit more at the master plan implementation committee?
Correct.
There's just, okay.
Well, it's up to the board, really. I mean, the board could review it first over the committee. Either way, it doesn't really matter as long as both committees and both boards have an opportunity to review it, comment on it.
So what's available right now is this longer, or it'd be ready as of tomorrow, I guess, this or soon, this longer document.
Yes.
They're gonna adjust it a little bit based on the working group's input.
Yes.
And so when would that be? And that's the thing that by the end of the month would be the
Will be
deliverable.
the final deliverable. They have some printouts for us and, but the PDF, they said, will be next week and we can start to use that how we feel.
Okay, would board members be interested in getting a look at that as soon as it's ready?
Yes.
Great,
Okay, I'll forward it to the full board
Excellent.
once it's able to be distributed.
thank you.
So,
Okay.
sorry, would that be on a future meetings agenda as what would that be? A hearing or just a discussion item?
Discussion item in a future agenda.
Is it to make like official board comments? Do we, yeah, is there like a motion to make certain recommendations? Is it formalized or is it just to talk about it?
Well, I would imagine that the board would hold a couple of, meetings as a discussion item and talk about it and maybe tweak it a little bit to how the board feels the plan should be in its final format. And then after that review and discussion, it would be an action item for the plan to actually vote on adopting the two chapters as updated chapters of the master plan.
And we could decide if we wanted to present this to the city council or something like that. When the original one came on 2014, it's again, the official approval is by this body. But I know we did get endorsement, I think we called it.
Final endorsement.
The city council.
Okay.
Is there a public hearing process that's required as part of that or?
The adoption of the master plan, you know what? So let me think about that. I don't think so.
I mean, certainly it was public engagement and that happened.
Yes.
That was part of their contract.
Exactly.
To do the public engagement that happened.
Good question, though. No, I don't think a public hearing is not required.
Is it an option? Like, would we want to do that?
Public hearing? No, I think as we talked about at the committee meeting, that we would do more community engagement. It's not over with the Conway School. We'll probably do at least another event to get additional input on, and what the committee feels like should be changes or additions, or maybe the committee and the board will like exactly what they presented and no changes be made, but it's just an opportunity for the board and the committee to review it and provide comment before official adoption, which does not require a public hearing. And I wouldn't even advise on a public hearing for that.
I mean, a public hearing is usually something that's required by ordinance or something, but we can always, I mean, as I just talked about at the beginning, we have flexibility about, encouraging public input. And we can always, if the board wanted, we could have a meeting and, have it clear that this was going to be on the agenda and we're open to hearing, as just we're discussing an open to hearing. Thoughts from the public?
I know there has already been a lot of public engagement around this. I was just wondering what the process is.
Yeah, it also, that's been a lot of what the implementation committee has done over the last decade is try to engage people and keep the profile of the master plan high. So people are aware of it.
I think the committee did a great job because there's communities out there where there's master plans that are done and they're hardly looked at.
And then there's communities that don't have a master plan and they don't have a planner and they don't know what to do.
Before the 2014 master plan, we had a 40-year-old master.
Oh, wow.
Another thing I want to just throw out there, because it's so exciting to have this transformation of the sport and have folks on.
A renaissance, really.
A renaissance, that's it brought me back to the idea of when I was involved in 2012 in the master plan advisory committee, I at some point went to the planning board website and I saw the first thing, the planning board has two basic roles. And the second one is reviewing, deciding, and making recommendations on development proposals, like we just did tonight. The first one is long-range planning. And, that was so appealing to me. And obviously the master plan is a perfect example of that. Specific duties include preparing plans for resources, possibilities, and needs of the city. And so it just seemed like an opportune time with new people coming onto the board to do some reflection about long-term planning. One thing that has come to the surface recently is about the major development review issue, and that's come up a couple of times. With one was a counselor making an initiative, another was a citizens petition about adjusting the traffic, and that's it was discussed in relation to the Aldi's, in relation to the Starbucks as well. And I'll just give a background that when this is obviously all around the library, arrangement, and when the proposal was made to make these adjustments to the MBR, the planning board voted 4-1, a negative recommendation about that. And we, over the years, had a few times, I couldn't tell you exactly when, but discussions about, well, we should probably at some point go back and see if we can, readjust some of those parameters about the master plan, because they were just kind of at the last minute, just kind of thrown together, and they weren't based on anything in particular, and maybe give them more reason. And so when it was just voted down for the second time about the going from 3,000 to 2,000, and one of the city councilors, Marion Bullock, commented that she was speaking to Al Norman, said, "No offense to you, Al, but I'd feel even better if this came from the planning board." And so I thought, boy, it might be good, and not in relation to some particular project. It's the longer range planning. We talk about maybe revisiting that. And I just had a couple of folks email me as chair, and they were bringing up also other long range things like the parking study that happened last year, I guess it was, and a couple of sites that are going to be reused at some point in the near future, like the Hope Street lot and with the fire station moving. I'm sure you're glad to be out of there. And
It's a welcome move.
and the school, what's the
Green Rivers.
Green River School, yeah. So I just thought it would be helpful if we had, and I don't want to get into details here because this is something that should be on the agenda, so the public is aware we're going to be discussing this. But I just wondered having a kind of an open-ended discussion about, priorities and, things we want to focus on for the current year. I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads, so that seems like that would be a good thing to do. So, great. And lastly, sadly, we don't have a vice chair, so we probably at the next meeting, I'm thinking. I'll have an agenda. Yeah. I'll have the vice chair.
Well, and I think, in terms of long-term planning, Bill H4138 that the Healy administration has filed in terms of affordable homes, I think we should probably be thinking it's coming down the pike, because if they're looking to dramatically affect the housing market, so we should probably have a discussion of how that would affect the way we look at planning in Greenfield.
Nice.
And I know the FERCog is doing a study. And they're like in conversation with the Healy Driscoll administration, so maybe we could invite them.
Nice. I know even as an alternate, you'll be vigorously engaged in this discussion.
Affordable housing is my passion.
Yeah, nice.
What are the mechanics for that sort of conversation? Like, what do we do? What comes out of it? Like, how do we guide that? Do we have a conversation and then like, what's an action item?
Yeah, an action item would be, I mean, it's kind of agenda planning for the next year. And we could say, yes, we want to. So I mentioned the MDR and the consensus the board could see, it's been voted down a couple of times. Let's not sweat on that. Or they might say, or the board might say, yeah, let's at some point, because we do have to have the other function. And so we have to fit these in somewhere. So we could, come up with things we were agreement about, and we could prioritize them and plan out month to month.
I didn't by action item. I just meant, so let's say that in 2 months, we talk about the parking plan or whatever it is.
Mhm.
Like, what is the outcome of that conversation? What's the mechanism how does that conversation have an effect on the world?
Yeah, no, I think that's part of the conversation. What's the status of that parking plan? Is that something, that's being implemented in some way by the executive branch or something like that, or council? I'm not sure. I mean, just.
Yeah, some of the things in the parking study is relevant to the board. This board does most of the zoning amendments in the city. It's 5 ways to do zoning amendments, but planning department working with planning board is the majority of zoning amendments in the city. So the parking plan does have some recommendations for zoning and parking. So we would look at that plan and discuss it and say, let's prioritize which of these action items the board should concentrate on to implement this plan.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, and I think that we do have an educational role in the city, and what I've noticed is that if there is a drastic change that's being, proposed by the executive branch, we would want to get ahead of any sort of changes that could happen, because what I see regularly is people going, why didn't anyone tell me that people can build ADUs by right suddenly? And I think it's very important that we, do our due diligence and make sure people know what this means for the city and the state.
Does the mayor come to these? Is there a liaison from the mayor's office?
No,
No, but we sat on the planning board with Ginny, so
Okay.
she's well versed in our roles and.
Okay.
My understanding is if there was a particular issue, we could invite someone
Okay.
from the mayor's office to attend a particular meeting.
I was on the Parking and Traffic Commission. My membership has lapsed. And I
Oh,
haven't,
with Bosch?
I haven't gotten officially back on, but I go to the meetings anyway for now.
Oh, good.
And the mayor came to the last one. Christian's the parking czar now.
Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah,
So we might just get an update from him on how he's implementing the parking plan. But yeah, like hearing from her, from a parking and traffic standpoint, what are her top priorities? What's on her mind is really helpful.
Uh-huh.
We could, not that I'm on that commission, but the commission could provide feedback that was helpful to her to get ahead of the things that happen. There was a missed opportunity, for example, they're repaving the court square. And they're just gonna pave it the way it was, stripe it the way it was, because that's just the expedient thing to do. And there was a suggestion, my suggestion was at least maybe restripe the roadway. Don't change the functionality. It could still be a one-way street. It could still have, you could actually get more parking than there is now, but narrow it up. It doesn't need to be 50 feet wide. And unfortunately, the ship had sailed on that already. So it's just going to continue to be a really, really wide one-way street. until the next time they have to repaint it. So if there were things that we care about in our conversations that the mayor is thinking about or someone else is thinking about, we can be ahead of those low hanging fruit decisions and make it a better project while not getting in their way to kind of get the main thing done.
Well, I know the planning board is near and dear to the disorder administration's heart because Jenny was a very, I would say, engaged and passionate member.
Okay, good.
I will, Mr. Chairman, can I comment on this Core Square thing? So I seem to be the defender of the DPW. So the only reason that's being paid, that wouldn't have been paid. The only reason it got paid, is gonna get paid is because I talked to my brother and, oh, let me add it to the list. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been paid for years.
Yeah.
So now we're gonna have a sweet looking repaved compared to what it looks now, because the DPW squeezed it in. There are many things they gotta do. So it's a good thing that they are able to pave it and get it done.
Yeah. I don't dispute that at all. It's just an example of something, and I agree that is a good thing, but sometimes you can add an extra layer of goodness to something. Maybe that wasn't a good example because it's moving too fast, but things like that. If something else is going to happen anyway, and maybe we can have it serve multiple purposes.
I totally hear you. This one that had to be added quickly in there, so
Sure,
that's
I
why,
appreciate that.
yeah.
And Eric, if I could ask you to identify your brother's role so they don't think he owns a paving company or something like that.
You know, my brother's an engineer and superintendent for the city of Greenfield.
Thank you. A lot of us know that, but not everyone.
And he does the paving program. So every year he decides with the mayor's office which roads get paved under chapter 90.
Oh, David Singer's joined us.
And again, the specific duty, just repeated, preparing plans of the resources, possibilities, and needs of the city. That's very broad. And so it having kind of a broad visioning session and then seeing how that comes, together with, some actual, action or, process.
Yeah. Good.
If there's nothing else,
Something else.
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, please.
Oh, sorry, Amy.
No, go for it.
Oh, well, I was just gonna say I went to the annual conference of the Massachusetts Citizen Planner Training Collaborative 2 weekends ago, Saturday ago. It was great. I recommend that organization. They had a webinar series this past fall that's over, but I think they're going to do it again. So I'll bring any opportunities to the attention of the board if that's of interest.
Definitely.
Yes, that's great.
David's popped up.
Sorry, Amy, I
Oh,
interrupted you.
no, I just was, I saw his name up there and I always think that the ZBA and the planning board could build more bridges. I know that in the past, there's been a very.
Yes. There, in the past, there was, on the contact sheet, there was 2 people from both boards that used to go to the other board. So like Roy Cowdray and Thomas Clown would go to every planning board meeting. And vice versa, 2 planning board members were reps, they go to all ZBA meetings. That hasn't happened in 10 years or more since Roy Cowdray era.
Yeah, well, I see Mark Maloney regularly and we have conversations, but then I always think like it would be actually really, because David Singer knows zoning in a way that like when he starts talking, I'm like, whoa. And I oftentimes am not clear about the difference between what comes before the ZBA and what comes before the planning board. So I think it would be interesting to like have a joint meeting at some point and, talk about it. And I think the public would like to know about the differences between our roles with zoning. And I think zoning is the articulation of our values, and some of the zoning I'm very uncomfortable with. And I'm sure you have some things to say as a planner and.
Yeah, I mean, zoning is a relic from the past. Typically, it's not a recipe for the future, is kind of what I would say. My firm does a lot of zoning work in like Lynn, for example, in Everett, communities where 96% of the parcels are non-conforming. So there's almost no relationship between what's built and what the regulations say.
Right.
Greenfield probably isn't quite that bad, but
But I think it's up there.
could be, yeah.
Eric, if you could at some point give a tutorial, I guess, to the board about the distinction between the ZBA and the planning board, our purview, and well, that would be helpful. Thanks.
I think there's a module from the Citizen Planner Training Collaborative on that. Rules of CBAs and rules of planning boards, so that would be good.
That was actually that was the first workshop. And I have notes and I'm happy to share if that would be appropriate.
As long as it's not just factual information, yes.
Yeah,
It's not deliberating.
Okay, so I could send them through email. Okay.
And if I do have those modules because I download them once the training, so I might have an actual
Okay.
presentation already on the other
Okay.
things I could forward to the board.
I have I have a copy of the
Oh,
presentation
yeah.
that I was at.
Could you forward that to me?
Yeah,
that'd
well,
be
did
great.
I forward it? I can forward it.
Can you forward it?
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
that'd be great.
And there are also some idiosyncratic things just specific to Greenfield, right, Eric? You would say. There's the standard, planning board, ZBA, zones of interest or oversight. And then there's some quirky things about Greenfield, I think you've alluded to. Is that some distinctive?
No, I was just saying that, there's a mix. So like, basically the job that you both share is your both special permit granting authority for certain things.
Mhm.
Zoning ordinance specifies who's the special permit granting authority on what. ZBA is 80% of the, or 85% of the special permit granting authority in Greenfield, and 15%. You only do a couple of things. Attached ADUs, flag lots, common driveways, and I think there's one other thing. That's it. The rest of the special permit granting authority is on the ZBA.
And some things have shifted.
Yes, and I was saying that it's a mix statewide. So if you were to look at every single town, you'd find that 50% of them, the planning board does most of the special permits, and the 50% of communities, the ZBA does. But I think ZBA doing most of the special permits is a relic of the past. And the towns that are doing more planning board special permits are up and coming. Like, for example, the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, when they always recommended that special permit granting authority be on the planners, the planning board members, and not ZBA. They consider the ZBA more quasi judicial board, variances and appeals and things like that. But so that's what I was saying. I think you were saying, George, that it could have been something else, but it's a mix. So, but in terms of the duties of both boards, it's typical for any other municipality.
What was the last part?
It's typical, you're responsible
Okay.
of any other municipality.
Yeah, that might have been what you were just talking about. Yeah. Pioneer Valley planning. So. Okay.
Well, and there's just been a lot of incidents recently that seem unprecedented where people move into town and get like a donkey and a llama and some sheep, and then it becomes like they say, well, we didn't know we needed 5, so I do think that we have a role to be like talking about like what the zoning is and what our values are and what is and isn't permissible. So that people don't have to go before the ZBA and have a giant public outcry.
I would say one other thing, I agree with Jeff, that zoning is kind of a relative of the past, but it had to be done, the initial reasons, we know why, but I lost my train of thought, but forget it.
Well, I mean, as the city planner, do you think that the zoning is a relic?
Oh, I was gonna say, the other half of that our zoning ordinance is very progressive. We have a good zoning ordinance as compared to most communities. It's very progressive. So, there are things that can be tweaked, it can be improved, but overall, it's one of the better ordinances, at least in Western Mass.
I would agree with that.
Very good. Well, great. It's great to have us all here at the table. Anything else? Huh?
Good to see a full board again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else before we adjourn? Want to make that motion?
I will make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second? Thank you. All in favor?